I haven't found an openness to change the way we've been doing business. And so I decided that I was going to run for mayor to try to influence the debate and the discussion and to try to win and to try to really bring change to our city. Change that I think is a long time in coming. I grew up, my parents grew up sort of instilling in us a belief in public service. My dad and my mom volunteered in the community. My dad was a Boy Scout troop leader. He was a volunteer fireman. And in his younger days, before all he did was play poker on Monday nights, they really fought the fires and did that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my background. So I had those values growing up. I also, that's part of my faith as well. That's part of what I was instilled in me as a child and was reinforced at Notre Dame, was the obligation that we have to each other. And so I have a very successful career, one that I can stay with for as long as I want. But at the same time, I see a need to try to change the trajectory of our community. And I don't see any other candidates coming forward with the ideas that I believe that I've advocated and the approach that I've advocated. We literally take what we spent last year and we let it grow by 3 or 4%. And then we spend, and I can show you the memos, and then we spend the entire 8-month budget cycle making the math work. And we never talk about why we're spending the $350 million that's underpinning that. So we spend the entire 8-month budget process talking about the 5% of the budget we have to trim or balance out, and not the 95% of the budget we keep. And that's enormously wasteful. And I know that, or I believe that other communities that have adopted performance-based budgeting across the United States, and the last count I had, there were 16 of them, Baltimore, Maryland, Springfield, Massachusetts, Warren, Michigan, are just 3 of the examples. But they have been able to find savings. Now, I believe performance-based budgeting works because we use it in the private sector. So I've lived performance-based budgeting in the private sector, and I know it works. Is it hard? Absolutely. Do you have to spend some money to invest in it? Absolutely. Is it difficult to change mentalities? Trust me, absolutely. It's incredibly hard to change those mentalities.
Could you give an example of that, Matt? Because it almost seems to imply that, well, the budget requests arrive at Tom Hamilton's desk and he just, rubber stamps at 3%. Like someone's not doing due diligence. What would change? Could you give an example?
Sure. Let me give you two examples. First of all, if you take a look at the budget book, I should have brought it in. It's in the car. If you take a look at the budget book, we break down the budget by department. So we spend, pick a number, $162 million on the Board of Education. We'll spend $12 million on the police department or the fire department. I haven't memorized these numbers. I'm just using them as an example. And then we spend that money in the budget. Why are we doing that if what we're trying to do is focus on public health and safety? Other cities go across departments. So for example, we may decide that this year we're going to spend $2 million to improve public health. Well, that doesn't necessarily go to the health department. That goes to improve public health. And maybe through a combination and collaboration, we identify that the place where there is a health crisis and the place where we can really use our money wisely is in fighting childhood obesity. Well, maybe it's not just the health department that gets to spend that money to fight child obesity. Maybe it's Parks and Rec that needs better summer and after-school programs. And maybe it's the Board of Education that needs more access to their facilities on weekends during the winter so kids have a place to be physically active and off the streets. And maybe that feeds into public safety as well. So then we'll take that $2 million and we'll say, okay, the way we can have the bigger impact on fighting childhood obesity is to pay to open our schools on weekends and during the winter in after hours so people have a place to go to play basketball or to have organized sports. So that's an example where we're paying for the service and we're trying to influence the service. We're not paying for the department. And it forces departments to work across departmental lines. Now, the interesting part of performance-based budgeting is private sector and not-for-profits have been doing this for
Constant
decades.
feedback loop.
One of the things that I think Frank, the Esposito administration, did very well, in the Schools for the New Millennium project, they started that with a massive community outreach effort. And I remember we had letters to every parent in the school system, online surveys, we had a consultant come in, and we gathered 600 people at City Hall on one night to start the process. But it didn't end there. We broke up into smaller groups and we met for months at a time to come together and build consensus. That was, I think it was a $300,000 investment of time and resources. But what it resulted in was a consensus among stakeholders about what we wanted in our schools program. I haven't seen a plan from Dick to move this city forward in the 8 years that he's been mayor. And that's my biggest problem with my opponents and with the current mayor. Have a plan. And candidly, if someone had come forward with a plan before I started talking about this race, I might not be here today. Because I easily could, look, you see the blogs. I get beat up all the time. I get that. I'm a tough guy. I'm used to that. I got a thick skin. I practiced labor and employment law in New York. What the heck. So, if I'm not getting yelled at the bargaining table, by some union guy who thinks that I'm the Antichrist, I haven't done my job for my client. But the point is, I'm used to that. I don't need this, right? But I'm doing this because I absolutely believe the issues that this city is going to face in the next 5 years will fundamentally alter our future. And if we don't handle them well, it will fundamentally alter our future for the worse. The start of the process is to try to free up resources from this $350 million budget. And so here's the idea. If we are able to save 1%, that's $3.5 million. I can close the gap in the Board of Education. I can fully fund the Board of Education. If I generate savings of 2%, I can fully fund the Board of Education. I can give targeted tax cuts to seniors, veterans, and the disabled. I get budgeted savings of 3%. That's an aggressive number. I get it. That's $10 million for infrastructure, for jobs, for economic development, for a community cityscape that becomes an inviting cityscape for everyone in Fairfield County to come to. If I'm able to do more than that, now I actually cut residential property taxes. We do that, we're golden.
Poor.
So I got a lot of emails from folks that I absolutely respect in the last budget debate who said, I'm dying in taxes. My husband hasn't worked in 2 years. How can you raise my taxes another 3%? I get that. That's real money. That's a real problem for people that have to sell their homes and move out of the community they've lived in all of their lives because we're making promises we can't keep. At the same time, we're spending $333 billion. That's the key for me. There are some people come to government service for the right reasons and some people don't. Some people come to the council and the government for the right reasons and some people don't. I think if you're basically saying yes to everybody, you're not doing your job. And so I think I bring a skill level that right now I don't think is there. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I ask a lot of questions, because I want the answers. When I'm satisfied, I end up saying, yeah, that's a good idea. When I'm not satisfied, I'll let people know that view too.